As Charles Dickens once said, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I was a sophomore in the first half of the year, a junior in the last half. It was a year of change as disco began to slide a little bit, but still maintaining some popularity. My own taste started to change as I grew from pop radio all the time to discovering album rock radio and artists that went along with it, discovering new kinds of music, and basically broadening my horizons beyond just pop that I loved so much. In March, I turned 16, the first big birthday of any kid's life, and it would be a banner year all the way around. And these are the top favorites of that year. The year was 1979. I'm TC Kirkham. This is Vinyl Recall. Hey, Vinyl community, TC Kirkham, the Kirkham Report here with Vinyl Recall. Been away for a few weeks, but we're getting back into track, right back where we left off. Last time I did 1978, and so this time it is time for 1979. This was a killer because there was so much good stuff that came out in 1979, and I have so many albums that I love that I did not have room for on this list. Just to go over a few of them. I discovered some of them at the time, and others I've discovered more recently, and some of them actually came to me through the vinyl community. But there were favorites all the way around. Stuff that didn't make the list that deserved to because they were so good. Barry Manilow's 1979 release, One Voice. The debut album from Ricky Lee Jones, which was phenomenally good. The Knack hit big with Get the Knack. Helen Reddy released her best album in 5 years, Ready, which the critics hated, but they were wrong. It was terrific. I discovered Light Album, L.A., from the Beach Boys, thanks to Chris Brophy. Really found a great album in that. And there were other great albums as well all year long. Now, I don't do score albums as part of my top 10, so my favorite score album of 1979 remains one of my favorite scores of all time, Star Trek The Motion Picture, done by Jerry Goldsmith. And there were other songs that were in other genres that I got into. Herb Alpert came back with Rise, and Spyro Gyra hit big with Morning Dance. Both of those also on my Also Ran list. But my top 10... they run the gamut from rock to pop to R&B to jazzy pop. A little bit of everything. So let's get started, shall we? At number 10. Number 10 from 1979. This was the last hit album these guys would have for 8 years in America. And I think people were just burnt out. I think that while the album did produce 3 number 1 hits, after that, they couldn't have a hit to save their life until 1989 was the next time they hit the top 10 in America. And it was a song from 1986, which I love, which brought them back in Europe. But without a question, it's one of my favorite albums of that year and is one of my favorite albums by them overall. It's not quite as good as Main Course, but it's close. Number 10, Spirits Having Flown, Bee Gees. This album contains their number 1 hits, Too Much Heaven, Tragedy, and Love You Inside Out, as well as Reaching Out, Spirits Having Flown, Search, Find, Stop, Think Again, Living Together, I'm Satisfied, and Until. Great gatefold cover with the Brothers Gibb there. This was the last disco album that they would record. There's the inner sleeve, probably taken somewhere in Florida, and the other men and revolving around that. Of course, it was on RSO Records, which is what their label was at the time. They produced some of the best music of the late 70s, from 1975 to 1980. There was no stopping them. after 1980, they were kind of bricked. Living Eyes was a bomb. They had a couple of minor hits from the Staying Alive soundtrack, which was the sequel, of course, to Saturday Night Fever, where their big hits were off of. But Spirits Having Flown is good from beginning to end. There isn't a bad song on the album, and I like Main Course better from 1975. It's my favorite Bee Gees album. But this comes a close second or third, and it is really an amazing piece of work, even for those of you who may not like Barry's falsetto on everything. I love it. Number 10, Bee Gees and Spirits Having Flown. Now, ironically, disco was at its peak in 1979, but of course, it was during the summer of 1979 that the infamous Disco Demolition Derby happened in Chicago, which kind of had disco fall out of favor, and there's a lot of opinions about what that was really about. Some people say it was anti-gay, some people say it was racist. I just thought it was just really poor taste. But by 1979, some artists were really embracing disco, and one of the acts that is the one that has the number 9 album. Again, it's my second favorite album by them. My first is probably coming up in 1980. But this album, again, from beginning to end, is top-notch, with one bump along the way. And I can't get enough of their music anyway. I've always loved them, and this is one of their best, and it's why it's number 9 on my list for 1979. ABBA's Voulez-Vous. This produced the title track, I Have a Dream, Angel Eyes, and Chiquitita, and Does Your Mother Know were all singles here or in Europe, along with As Good as New, The King Has Lost His Crown, If It Wasn't for the Nights, Lovers Live a Little Longer, and Kisses of Fire, which was the flip side of one of the singles and is one of my favorite ABBA songs of all time. This one was picked up that summer through RCA Record Club, because I had no way to get to Spokane to pick it up. Comes with a great, nice cardboard inner sleeve. On Atlantic here in America, it was on Polar in the rest of the world. This represents ABBA at almost their peak. They hit... Arrival was fantastic, and I know they loved the album the best. But Voulez-Vous, they wrapped their minds around disco, and Voulez-Vous is a full-out disco song. I mean, they went full disco on that. The one bump here is Does Your Mother Know? I'm not a big fan of that song. I'm not sure why. I liked it. I didn't love it. But Voulez-Vous, I Had a Dream, Angel Eyes, Chiquitita, Kisses of Fire, ABBA standards, and they are all fantastic. All because ABBA knew how to grasp disco and make it work. Hey, these are the guys that won Eurovision in 1974. They knew how to make things work. Bjorn and Benny and Annifrid and Agnetha, all terrific at what they do, and it was nice to see them come back in 2021. This album is always going to be one of my favorites by them. Voulez-Vous, number 9 for 1979. I'd like to put number 8 higher, but I can't. It's one of my favorite albums of the year, but number 1, the packaging is ludicrous. Number 2, the songs are in and out. Some of them are great, a couple of them are good. There's one or two clunkers of sorts, but it does have the band's biggest hit and one of my favorite songs by the band as well. I have always been a fan, and I talked about them on Influencers last season, and they were the first band I got to see in concert, and they were dynamite. And this came out at the very tail end of 1979. I think it was released in December, and it's one of my favorites, even though it has its drawbacks. Styx is cornerstone. This features their monster hit, Babe, which became their biggest hit. Also, Why Me was a single off the album, and so was, I want to say Borrowed Time was also. Lights, Why Me, Babe, Never Say Never, Boat on the River, Borrowed Time, First Time, Eddie, and Love in the Midnight. It has this ridiculous flap thing. The album is, the inner sleeve is actually the album cover. And there's all this symbology on it. And of course, the satanic panic people started finding all kinds of evil symbols in this. And of course, they were on A&M. Babe is a great song, and I know some people who like the rocking sticks don't like Babe, but I like Babe. Babe is a great song, but Boat on the River is a Tommy Shaw masterpiece, and I hate people that try to divide the band into the Shaw camp and the Dennis DeYoung camp. I love both men. I love both of their stuff as solo artists. I love Tommy's stuff with Damn Yankees and Shaw Blades. Tommy's solo albums I thought were a hair better than Dennis's, but Dennis, it was not because of anything to do with them. It was more about song choices. Dennis's 10 on Broadway was phenomenally good. But Desert Moon was kind of a bore except for the main song, and Back to the World was better, and it didn't do that well. So, I don't know. But in any case, Cornerstone, I'm not really a big fan of a couple of the songs, but like I said, Babe is great, Why Me is great, Never Say Never, Borrowed Time, Boat on the River, and Lights. I'm glad they didn't release First Time as a single, which Tommy Shaw vetoed because it is another ballad and it would have come out right after Babe, so Why Me was a better choice. And it's also, I'm not as big a fan of that song as I am of Babe. But in any case, it is a great album and well worth being on this list. Cornerstone Sticks, number 8. Number 7. The best album this band ever produced, as far as I'm concerned. It was on the Kirkham Report. This album produced their only number 1 hit on the Kirkham Report, and I love every song on this album. I became a fan from the live album in 1979, which was actually released in late 1978. But this album there's just nothing bad on it. It's fantastic from beginning to end. Number 7, Dream Police from Cheap Trick. Cheap Trick's best album by far overall. And Dream Police, Way of the World, The House is Rockin' with Domestic Problems, Gonna Raise Hell, I'll Be With You Tonight, Voices, Writing on the Wall, I Know What I Want, and Need Your Love. Dream Police is Cheap Trick's only number 1 hit on the Kirkham Report. Love that song. I also love Voices. I was surprised that a couple other songs weren't released as singles, at least as far as I know. They weren't on the radio if they did get released. But I heard a lot of this on Album Rock Radio when I started listening to that. And loved it from that point on. They have a lyric sleeve in here with this. And pictures of them in the Dream Police costumes. And of course they are on Epic Records. Cheap Trick has got a lot of good albums, but no great albums, except this one as far as I'm concerned. I know Emma over at 8 Vinyl Low probably wants to take my head off at this point. I know she's a huge Cheap Trick fan. I am too. Don't get me wrong. I love their singles, but their albums are kind of in and out in some places. I have In Color, and I have a few other ones, and I have Found All the Parts, the 10-inch EP. But Dream Police is just top all the way from beginning to end, and I love it. And it just rocking all the way through. Number 7, Dream Police from Cheap Trick. Number 6 is going to surprise a few people, and a lot of people don't take this guy seriously. Excuse me. In 1979, there was some crossbreeding going on between the remnants of disco and the upcoming new wave sound. And this guy was at the forefront. Gary Newman did some of it. The Devo did some of it. The Cars kind of were on the fringe of it. But this guy, people don't give this guy enough credit. They think he's a one-hit wonder, which technically he is. He only had 1 major hit in America, and I think 2 in Europe. But he's well known, and it's because he keeps coming up with new mixes of that 1 hit from 1979, as well as doing other great original stuff. I have 2 of his albums. I have a couple of 12-inch singles with great mixes. And I love the guy. I love this album, and I think it deserved better credit than it got. even though it only produced the one big hit. And that big hit was a #1 hit in a lot of places, but I will never forget, I used to get the weekly survey from KJRB AM in Spokane. When I lived in Harrington, they would send it to me every week. And one week the song was #1, the next week it had fallen completely off the playlist. People were that sick of it. It happens every now and then, but not for me. #6, and I want to get the title right because I always screw it up. New York, London, Paris Music by M. M, aka Robin Scott. This album has Cowboys and Indians, Made in Munich, Modern Man, Satisfy Your Lust, Moonlighted Music, Pop Music, That's the Way the Money Goes, Unite Your Nation, and Woman Make Man, as Andy Warhol style Albert Einstein pics on the back. An interesting inner sleeve, which doesn't really show him at all, and he was, I think, the first album I ever got with a custom label on Sire Records also. I don't think I had a Sire album before that. The man is, I wouldn't, there are a number of acts that I would classify as genius. He's not on that top level, but he's very close. He's on par with Miko and a few other people in my book for the creativity that he has. Both Pop Music and Moonlighted Music and Modern Man were hits on the Kirkham Report chart. He would later come back with an album called The Official Secrets Act in 1980 or 81. Had great stuff on it too. He just had a remix single of Pop Music at Record Store Day, which I picked up and should be here in the next week. Love the guy. And if you've never heard the album, I suggest you give it a try. If you like new wave music, if you like danceable new wave music, this is a good album to listen to. Yes, some people really loathe pop music. It's not let's be honest, it's not as bad as, say, We Built This City by Starship, but it does grate on people from time to time. But Modern Man, Satisfy Your Lust, really underrated tracks by him, and I'd like to see him get more love. M, New York, London, Paris, Munich, #6 on my 1979 list. Now, the remaining 5 are all albums that have been huge across the board. In fact, 4 of them hit #1 on Billboard's 200 album chart. They are all their own style, and they all have a certain vibe about them. But they are all albums that are excellent from beginning to end. There's no clunkers on them at all. And each one represents a change of style of sorts for each act, except the one whose debut it was here. And people were getting to know his style. We'll come to that in a minute. #5, the band had hits in America before, but they never really had a monster until this album. They had 3 top 20 hits from this album, 2 of which I believe, one went to the top 10, the other just missed the top 10, and the third one got into the top 20 or just below it. And there was a 4th song that was a huge single overseas that got a lot of album airplay on AOR stations. This is their best album as far as I'm concerned, and I have always enjoyed them, but nothing ever as good as this one. #5 for 1979, Breakfast in America from Supertramp. It's very eerie seeing this picture now with what looks like straw boxes representing the Twin Towers. It's at post 9/11, that kind of imagery is always a little jarring, but this album cover is iconic. The album back is iconic, another one that came from RCA Record Music Club. Not a bad song on this whole album. Gone Hollywood, The Logical Song, Goodbye Stranger, Breakfast in America, Oh Darlin', not the Beatles song. Take the Long Way Home, Lord Is It Mine, Just Another Nervous Wreck, Casual Conversations, and Child of Vision. Logical Song was, I think, their biggest hit ever, except for Maybe It's Raining Again, which peaked at #11, but was a big, it stayed on the chart forever. Goodbye Stranger and Take the Long Way Home also did well. Breakfast in America was a hit single in Europe. And it was a great song, too. It should have been a hit here. I always loved Just Another Nervous Wreck because talk about life the way it is. Great stuff. The band from Scotland really knocked it out of the ballpark with this. Well, partially from Scotland. They had the lyric sleeve. And, of course, they also had a custom label. So, actually, this one was the first for the custom label, not M. But A&M Records for them. I don't think they ever quite got to this point again. And they'd had, I loved a lot of their earlier stuff too, but of all their stuff, this is the only thing I own the full album by except the Greatest Hits collection. And I think I have that on CD. And I played this sucker to death. This was how I started easing myself out of all disco, all teen idols, all top 40 all the time, and getting more into, not to say that Logical Song and the other songs were not top 40 hits, they were, but they were more edgy, and now I'm having a Steve Carlson moment here. I can't get it back in the sleeve. Breakfast in America from Supertramp, number 5 on my list for 1979. Number 4 is barely in there again. Again, this was released in December. He would dominate the 1981 Grammy Award ceremony because of this debut album. And why he didn't... This album was so huge that I don't think he ever recovered from it. The next 3 albums on Warner Brothers were not big hits, even though their third album, which produced 0 major hits, was his best, in my opinion. I love this album. I love everything about it. There's not a bad song on it. And it produced a Grammy Award-winning Record of the Year. And it is terrific. Rick Beato recently raved about the guitar solo that the man does. Because the man's a guitarist extraordinaire, and people don't really think of him that way. Rick is right. They don't think of him that way because they know his music as a vocalist. And yet he can shred. Oh my God. And have you ever listened to the end of Ride Like the Wind? I'll try to put a link to that video Rick did on it because it is amazing. And obviously Ride Like a Wind. Number 4, the debut album from Christopher Cross. The flamingo became his symbol. This features Say You'll Be Mine, I Really Don't Know Anymore, Spinning, Never Be the Same, Poor Shirley, Ride Like the Wind, The Light Is On, Sailing, and Minstrel Gigolo. 4 of these, I believe, were, maybe, let's see, Say You'll Be Mine, I Really Don't Know Anymore, Ride Like the Wind, Never Be the Same, and Sailing. Though there are 5 singles off this album, all of which hit the top 40, and Ride Like the Wind, Sailing, and Say You'll Be Mine were all top 10 hits. Amazing debut from this man. A lot of good help, produced by Michael Omardi, and this is where I first discovered him as a producer in a big way, and love his stuff, a lot of the acts he's worked with. But my gosh, I mean, the session players he has on here, he has Michael McDonald on backup vocals, he has Nicolette Larson on backup vocals and duet vocals with Say You'll Be Mine. Eric Johnson, one of his earliest acts on here, one of his earliest appearances. Don Henley, I mean, my God, the man, for somebody who had never had a hit, Larry Carlton, Valerie Carter, Lenny Castro, I mean, an amazing array of musicians were on this album to help him out, and 5 Grammys, I think it won, including Album and Record of the Year for Sailing. Christopher Cross, number 4 on my 1979 album list. Number 3, this one's going to surprise people, although I've said I like these guys, and I always will. They are one of my favorite acts of all time. But it's a different type of music. Every time that they've released a hit single, every single they've had has had a different sound completely. Because every album they do, they morph into a different style. This is how they stay relevant, even 50 years almost after the original form of the band was first put together. They've changed memberships a couple of times with one lady leaving and another coming in, and then more recently one of the original members passed away, and they have a new person in for him. But they're still fantastic. Here in 2023, amazing. In 1980, produced one of my favorite albums by them. I have two albums I adore by them, and my favorite will be coming up in a couple of years. But this album changed the way I looked at music in a big way, because I was not used to jazz and jazz pop rhythms in pop and dance music. And I knew them from a couple of earlier hits, one of which sounded like it was from the 1930s, the other one like a crooner song from the 1940s. This one was, I mean, everything about it is just amazing. And if you like them, you probably know this album and love it as much as I do. It really took off in the spring of 1980 with album play from one song and a single hit from the other. But it came out in October of 1979, and so I'm counting it here. Number 3, Extensions by Manhattan Transfer. Love this album. This album has Birdland and Twilight Zone, Twilight Tone. Birdland is probably their best known song. Amazing, amazing stuff. Also, Wacky Dusk, Nothing You Can Do About It. Cuckoo You, which is truly one of the weirdest things you'll ever hear. Body and Soul, Trickle Trickle, Shaker Song, and Foreign Affair. At the time, this was shortly after Laurel Massey had left the band after a car accident. And she had been in the band from, I think, the beginning in 1972. She was replaced by Cheryl Benteen, joining Janice Siegel, Tim Hauser, and Alan Paul, who's also unfortunately passed on these days. But Birdland, I saw them perform on American Bandstand, and it just blew me away. Birdland remains one of my all-time favorite songs of anybody, and this album is amazing. Now, I like another album of theirs just a hair better, but that'll be coming up in the mid-'80s. We'll talk about that later. But for now, I can't highly recommend this enough. You guys, if you don't know it and you like this kind of music, put it on. Extensions, the Manhattan Transfer from 1979. Number 2, we've got to talk about for a minute. Number 2 accomplished more than anything anybody could have expected. This guy he had a big run of success in the early 70s. And then, in 1975, the success kind of stopped. At least on his own. He continued to do well with his brothers for another year or two. Then, everything stopped for a while. The brothers changed their names from one to the other. They had a TV series which lasted a season, I think, one summer series, and then another 6-week run in the fall that didn't last very long. Variety series. But it did introduce younger members of the family. He met and worked with Quincy Jones for the first time on the movie The Wiz. And he was really getting ready to do his first solo album in 4 years. And Quincy said, "Let me produce you." Nobody had any clue what would happen. Nobody. Except maybe the man behind it. Number 2, Off the Wall, Michael Jackson. Michael had not had a solo hit since Just a Little Bit of You in 1975, until Don't Stop Till You Get Enough debuted on the Billboard Hot 100 in late 1979. It hit number 1, as did the follow-up Rock With You. This album ended up producing 6 top 10 hits. Those 2 songs, Off the Wall, She's Out of My Life, and is that right? There should be one more on there. In addition, there's also Working Day and Night, Get on the Floor, Girlfriend, I Can't Help It, It's the Falling in Love, and Been There, Burn This Disco Out. Can't even read it anymore. Um, so there were 4 hits off this, and that was an amazing number for the time. Um, Nobody could see what Michael was about to do. And with Thriller, 3 years later, he would catapult himself to true superstardom. Now, he'd made a minor comeback with the brothers, now known as the Jacksons, since they left Motown in 1976. In the spring and summer of 1979, with 2 R&B hits that did cross over, Blame It on the Boogie and Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. No, sorry, Shake Your Body Down to the Ground. But by the time this album came out, Michael was poised to go crazy. And this album went nuts, and then Thriller in 1982 would blow people away. And he has remained an icon. We lost him in 2009 at the age of 50. Insane. Michael Jackson, number 2, off the wall. Number 1 for 1979. If you know me, you may have figured it out because I've praised this woman beyond belief. She remains one of my all-time female vocalists. She is definitely in my top 5 female vocalists. She's close, probably 2 or 3 behind Karen Carpenter and a couple of other people. And 1979 produced her biggest hit album. It produced her biggest hit singles. She was on a roll, and by the end of the year, she would jump labels after the label she was on made her a superstar, and her work with Geffen Records would not do as well, although she would continue to have hits for a number of years, although her biggest hit during her Geffen years was actually to fulfill the contract she left behind with Casablanca. But this album is a watershed for her because previously she was the queen of disco, and here, while it has plenty of disco on it, she's got full-on rock on a number of songs and a number of other songs that are just incredible ballads that blow everyone's mind. My number 1 album from 1979, Bad Girls, Donna Summer. This album is an absolute must-have in your collection. If you have no other Donna Summer, I would recommend On the Radio as the greatest hits album, but as a non-greatest hits, Bad Girls must be it. Hot Stuff, Bad Girls, Love Will Always Find You, Walk Away, Dim All the Lights, Journey to the Center of Your Heart, One Night in a Lifetime, Can't Get to Sleep at Night, On My Honor, There Will Always Be a You, All Through the Night, My Baby Understands, Our Love, Lucky, and Sunset People. This is a rock and disco classic. Eddie Van Halen, I believe, was the guitarist on Hot Stuff. There was some incredible riffs all the way across the album and on all the rock stuff. Both of these albums have lyric sleeves, and of course she was on Casablanca at the time. Donna Summer was, from the very beginning, I think, destined to be a superstar. She had done a couple of minor hits in Europe before clicking big with Love to Love You Baby in early 1976, and it took her a while to really get into the mainstream, but when she did, which probably mostly happened with 1977's I Feel Love forward, she was there to stay, and she would be there to stay through the mid-'80s. She continued to have hits on Geffen, but like I said, her biggest, when she left Casablanca, she had an album that she still owed them, and but she was tired of going this direction. She wanted to go a different direction, and David Geffen offered her that chance. But her album, She Works Hard for the Money, released on Mercury because Casablanca had been absorbed by Polygram at that point, became her biggest non-Casablanca album, and She Works Hard for the Money, her biggest hit outside of the 70s period. Donna was a vocalist that just could not do wrong with me. I highly recommend Live and More, also from 1978, and other stuff. I mean, I have most everything she's done. I'm missing a few things, but I adore the woman. I always will adore the woman. She's fabulous. And Bad Girls, as a whole, is amazing. Bad Girls, as a single, along with Hot Stuff, Dim All the Lights, and the disco, the 12-inch single of Sunset People, they're all classics. You cannot hear those songs and not think of this album. They are so associated with Donna Summer, so associated with this album, that you walk away also was a hit later off of a greatest hits album. She can do no wrong, and this album can do no wrong either. Play it from beginning to end, starting with side 1 and ending with side 4. You will hear the magic all the way through it. Every session player, everything that goes on this album makes it perfect for me. And it is not just my number 1 album, 1979. It's one of my top albums of all time. 1979's number 1, Donna Summer, Bad Girls. Let me recap for you. My top 10 albums of 1979. Number 10, Spirits Having Flown by Bee Gees. Number 9, Voulez-Vous by ABBA. Number 8, Cornerstone by Styx. Number 7, Dream Police by Cheap Trick. Number 6, New York, London, Paris, Munich by M. Number 5, Breakfast in America by Supertramp. Number 4, the debut album from Christopher Cross, eponymous album. Number 3, Extensions, Manhattan Transfer. Number 2, Off the Wall, Michael Jackson. And number 1, Bad Girls by Donna Summer. Next time on Vinyl Recall, we'll move into the 80s. Everybody else is already in the 80s, pushing the 90s. But the 1980s changed my musical taste forever. Everything was changing so fast, and I became fans of so many different styles along with what I already liked. Still maintaining my pop and my dance and stuff, but getting more into heavy metal, getting more into new wave, getting into new age as well later in the decade. It'll be interesting as we get into 1980 and you start to see my tastes change. So we'll handle that next time. Excuse me for partially yawning. And I hope that you will enjoy that. I enjoy doing this, which is based on Vinyl Richie's thread that he started about a year ago, and everybody's been doing them year by year. I enjoy doing it too. My albums are never on anybody else's list, for sure, but I enjoy them, and there's stuff I still listen to and love every day. And I urge you to check out what I have here, because you may just find a gem there. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you have already. Thank you. And if you haven't, please do. Don't forget to share my shows on social media with your favorite accounts on Twitter, Facebook, and what have you. And please leave a comment. I love talking to you. Comments mean everything to me, and I haven't been catching up on them because we've got all this stuff going on. But I will be catching up on them soon. Don't forget to check out all my other shows, usually at 4 p.m. Eastern, although Daily Obscuria is Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. And Finding Your Music Mojo with TC and Dawn is every other Monday at 6 p.m. and it's live on both of our channels, TKR Video Central and 2 Hip Chicks. Everything else appears at 4 o'clock on this channel, and there's one almost every day, so you can check it out. Although this week there won't be another one until Saturday because I don't have time to do it, but there'll be more. And next week we'll be back to our regular schedule. Until then, for Vinyl Recall, I'm TC Kirkham, the Kirkham Report. Thanks for watching. Can't wait to see what everybody else has got too. Ciao, baby.